For a multitude of reasons, 9 Astartes legions betrayed the Imperium and joined War Master Horus's rebellion. After their victory at the drop site massacre on Istvan V, this army of destruction openly declared their traitorous allegiance. Leveraging the power of their warp allies, they disrupted the Imperium's military movements and communications, marching relentlessly toward the Sol system. Yet even with a host of allies at his side, Horus knew some of his Primarch brothers would never submit to him, and their strength could tip the scales of the war. Thus, he orchestrated the deployment of 3 of the most loyal and powerful legions to the edges of the galaxy, assigning them to distant missions. The loyalist Dark Angels of the Eye Legion were locked in brutal combat against the Gethin League, a renegade human faction that refused to swear fealty to the Imperium. The noble Blood Angels of the IX Legion were sent to the Cygnus cluster to purge Xenos invaders from its worlds, and the mighty Ultramarines of the 13 Legion received orders to crush an ork WAAGH. Rising in the Viridian system, these missions, however, were nothing but elaborate traps crafted by Horus. His goal was to scatter these 3 formidable forces, then destroy them one by one. The fate of these loyalist legions would determine the course of the Great Heresy. The 13th Legion was a force to be reckoned with. The number of worlds the Ultramarines had conquered during the Great Crusade rivaled that of Horus's own lunar wolves. What set them apart, though, was their unique talent for governing the worlds they reclaimed. Whenever the Ultramarines conquered a planet, they personally established governing bodies prioritizing the well-being of the local populace. The Legion left behind skilled administrators and advisors to foster the planet's economy, helping it integrate into the Imperium's interstellar trade network. Simultaneously, they trained and organized planetary defense forces tailored to the world's needs. While other legions left a trail of death and destruction in their wake, the Ultramarines brought progress and prosperity to the realms they liberated. This ethos stemmed from their Primarch, Rabut Guilliman. Guilliman may not have been the deadliest warrior among the Emperor's Primarchs, but he was a genius in politics and governance. He had been adopted by the rulers of Macragge, the world where he had crash-landed as an infant and raised in a loving, stable family. This set him apart from many of his Primarch brothers. He had known the affection of mortal parents, Conor Guilliman, his adoptive father, a planetary governor, and Tarasha Uton, his adoptive mother. This idyllic childhood allowed Guilliman to understand human emotions, granting him a humanity that eluded most other Primarchs. When Conor was assassinated during a noble uprising, the lessons of honor and duty he had imparted left an indelible mark on Guilliman. The Primarch quelled the rebellion and ascended to Macragge's throne, transforming the world into a self-sufficient, prosperous realm by the time the Emperor arrived. With superhuman political acumen, Guilliman restructured Macragge's society into a meritocracy. Lands and wealth seized from rebellious nobles were redistributed to the people. Anyone with talent or a strong work ethic could earn rank and glory. His mind operated at a relentless pace, processing mountains of administrative work with meticulous precision. He could oversee hundreds of tasks simultaneously, offering concise, optimal guidance for each. Observation and documentation were his strengths. As a seasoned politician, he tailored his demeanor to win the trust of others, extracting vital information with ease. As a military strategist, he reshaped the 13th Legion into a versatile force, equally adept at offense and defense, disciplined yet resolute, and capable of joint operations, cross-theater warfare, and adapting to any battlefield environment. Before every battle, Guilliman demanded thorough preparation. He taught his senior officers to anticipate every enemy move, ensuring strategic objectives were achieved quickly and with minimal casualties. Beyond combat training, he mandated his Astartes study administration, culture, and diplomacy. His vision was for Ultramarines to become the Imperium's finest statesmen and leaders once peace came. When that day arrived, he believed, Astartes should channel their superhuman energies into governing worlds, not just conquering them. As the Great Crusade progressed, the Ultramarines reclaimed world after world under Guilliman's command. The populace of these planets was won over by his governance, and parents clamored to send their sons to join the Legion. Even ancient, prestigious noble houses regarded a descendant's induction into the Ultramarines as the highest honor in their lineage. The 13th Legion grew in size alongside the territories it liberated. By the eve of the Heresy, it had become the largest Astartes Legion with over 250,000 Astartes, a massive fleet, and legions of mortal auxiliaries. Unlike other legions, which controlled only a handful of recruiting worlds, or even just one, Guilliman ruled the Ultramar sector, a domain of nearly 500 worlds, centered on Macragge, governed jointly with his legion's commanders. Under Ultramarine rule, the people of Ultramar were hardworking and resilient. They enjoyed a standard of living far above most of the Imperium, while Ultramar itself functioned as a hyper-efficient war machine. Countless armories, shipyards, agri-worlds, and military academies supplied the Legion with endless war materiel. When Ultramar mobilized at full capacity, its military potential was terrifying, and this is what Horus feared. If Guilliman, the Lord of the 500 Worlds, the King of Ultramar, learned of the rebellion, Ultramar's vast strength would become the traitor's greatest obstacle. The Primarch and his micro-empire had to be destroyed. After the battle on Istvan V, Horus ordered the Word-Bearers Legion to march on the Ultramar sector. A warp storm raged across the galaxy, cutting the Ultramarines off from news of the Heresy. They had already gathered on the planet Calth, following War Master Horus's orders, and awaited the arrival of the Word-Bearers, under the pretense of launching a joint campaign against the Ork Gaslak Nobili in the Eastern Fringe. Guilliman, ever the astute politician, suspected Horus was forcing the two estranged legions to cooperate to assert his authority and mend their fractured relationship. The 13th Legion saw the mission as a delicate political exercise and resolved to treat the Word-Bearers with utmost respect to bury past grievances. The first Word-Bearers forces, led by their first captain Cor Phaeron and the corrupt chaplain, evil Apostle Erebus, arrived on Calth. The Ultramarines greeted them warmly, delegations met to coordinate, and troops maneuvered on the ground and in orbit to prepare for the joint operation. But beneath the Word-Bearers' smiles lay a venomous betrayal, and soon signs of unease began to surface. The warp storm intensified, psychers sensed anomalous energy surges, radio channels crackled with eerie, low chanting, and even Calth's data networks were infected with viral code the Adeptus Mechanicus could not erase. These warnings, however, were drowned out by the chaos of mobilization and diplomatic niceties. This was both the Ultramarines' strength and their weakness. They were a legion renowned for discipline, but their adherence to protocol and orders made them unable to fathom an attack from a fellow Astartes legion. They would soon pay a terrible price. Without warning, the Bell of Lost Souls, a large Word-Bearers supply ship, entered Calth's orbit, activated its void shields, and hurtled toward the assembled 13th Legion fleet. Most of the moored Ultramarine warships had not even powered up their engines. At the same time, Calth's orbital defense systems were disabled by daemon-infused code that had lurked in its data networks, leaving the ship unchallenged. The Bell of Lost Souls crashed through the fleet like a bullet through unarmored flesh, tearing apart everything in its path before slamming into an orbital dock filled with warships. The Word-Bearers fleet, which had been lying in wait, opened fire. Loyalist vessels, still reeling from shock, were battered by a hail of munitions. Calth's orbital space became an inferno. Warships dozens of kilometers long were destroyed before they could retaliate, burning space docks fragmented, and massive debris plummeted into the atmosphere under Calth's gravity city, sized chunks of metal scarring the planet's surface. On the ground and in orbit, Word-Bearers troops shed their camouflage. They drew their weapons and fired on the stunned Ultramarines. Who could have imagined that brothers who had shared wine and conversation mere moments earlier would turn their bolters on each other? The first Ultramarines to fall died confused. Past tensions aside, outright fratricide was unthinkable. But it was this betrayal by kin that made the attack so devastating. The assault on Calth was masterminded by Cor Phaeron, Lorgar's adoptive father and Word-Bearers, first captain and Erebus, who had assembled a massive force for the operation. Their troops struck with precision, while the Ultramarines, still in the dark, were caught completely off guard. Chaos had never erupted within the 13 Legion like this. The betrayal left them reeling, unable to comprehend the truth. Even Guilliman, in the early moments of the attack, thought it might be an accident. He tried to contact Lorgar, hoping to resolve a misunderstanding, but the Word-Bearers' relentless assault left no room for delusion. Word-Bearers' warships bombarded every Loyalist structure in orbit, while others descended to low orbit to unleash indiscriminate fire on Calth's factories, cities, and military installations. On the ground, their troops systematically targeted anti-aircraft emplacements, communication hubs, military bases, and troop concentrations. The Loyalists were thrown into disarray, their comms networks were paralysis, and automated defenses teetered on the brink of failure. The Ultramarines finally realized this was a premeditated attack. Worse still, the Word-Bearers performed unspeakable rituals amid the carnage. They sacrificed the dead and dying to the Chaos Gods, trading souls for power. These ancient, senseless ceremonies warped the laws of real space, blurring the line between reality and the warp. With each living sacrifice and each chant, hundreds of daemons spilled into Calth. These warp entities, fragments of the Chaos God's consciousness, fed on intense emotion, death, and suffering were their sustenance, and they craved more blood, more souls. The battle for Calth had descended into madness. For the fanaticism, Word-Bearers, pleasing the dark gods with unspeakable atrocities, became their sole purpose. The air hummed with insane, evil whispers, and all reason vanished from the battlefield. Even the Ultramarines, veterans of 1,000 campaigns, had never faced such horror. Satisfied as he watched Calth burn, Lorgar sent a holographic transmission to Guilliman. The Word-Bearers had deliberately spared the Ultramarines' flagship, the Macragge's Honor, a massive 26-kilometer-long Lorehammer-class battleship intent on humiliating Guilliman and seizing the vessel via boarding action. Lorgar taunted his brother, boasting of the Chaos God's power and the traitor's victory at Istvan. 3 Loyalist legions destroyed, the Iron Hands Primarch beheaded, Horus rising, and the Emperor soon to fall. The news shattered Guilliman. He could not fathom Horus betraying the Emperor. Then Lorgar uttered a foul incantation. Using warp sorcery, he channeled a devastating explosion through the hologram link, detonating it on the Macragge's Honor's bridge. Guilliman, who had not donned his helmet, was thrown into the void by the blast, vanishing without a trace. Lorgar handed command of the Calth campaign to Cor Pharaon and Erebus, then led the rest of the Word-Bearers to join Angron and his World Eaters Legion. Together, they launched the Shadow Crusade, Lorgar's eyes blazing with fanaticism, determined to drown the 500 worlds in blood to please the Chaos Gods. The 13 Legion reeled from the betrayal. Calth's orbital fleet and defenses lay in ruins, the sky lit by the burning wreckage of crashed warships. On the ground, every Ultramarine outpost was under siege. Unspeakable warp creatures, shrouded in the stench of death, assaulted Loyalist lines, their mere presence threatening to corrupt souls. The Word-Bearers chanted ceaselessly, praising the dark gods and inciting their troops to greater depravity. To the traitors, the Ultramarines were defeated. Their Primarch was lost to the void, their forces shattered, and Calth under control. Their only remaining goal was to offer more lavish sacrifices to Chaos. But as before, the Ultramarines' discipline, once a weakness, became their salvation. The Word-Bearers, consumed by fanaticism, had underestimated the 13 Legions' resilience and resolve. As time passed, surviving Ultramarines rallied, setting aside shock to execute Guilliman's precepts from the Codex Astartes, a military doctrine he had drafted. They re-established command chains, reclaimed communication nodes, and began to adapt to the Word-Bearers' tactics. Surviving captains, such as Uriel Ventress's predecessor, Maneus Calgar, who would later become chapter master, took charge of scattered units. They used Calth's industrial infrastructure to their advantage, repurposing factories to repair weapons and armor, converting shipyards into fortified strongholds, and leveraging the planet's underground tunnels to launch hit-and-run attacks. The Ultramarines' mortal auxiliaries, though outmatched by Chaos Astartes, fought with fierce devotion, holding the line to buy time for their Astartes allies. Even the daemons' terror began to fade as the Ultramarines learned to counter them. Psychers, guided by the Legion's librarians, wove protective wards. Chaplains chanted hymns to the Emperor, purging corruption with faith, and tactical squads focused fire on daemon hosts, using holy water-infused bolter rounds to banish the warp entities back to the Imperium. The word-bearers, meanwhile, grew overcompetent. Their focus on sacrifices left their flanks exposed, and their fanaticism tactics became predictable. The Ultramarines exploited this, ambushing word-bearers' ritual parties, sabotaging their supply lines, and retaking key defensive positions. One pivotal moment came when a squad of Ultramarine assault marines boarded the Bell of Lost Souls, now a den of chaos cultists, and destroyed its core, triggering a chain reaction that annihilated the ship and hundreds of traitors. As the battle dragged on, the Ultramarines' resolve only hardened. They did not know if Guilliman was alive or dead, but they fought in his name, clinging to his vision of Ultramar as a beacon of order. Word began to spread among the loyalists. Guilliman's micro-empire was not so easily destroyed. Ultramar's other worlds, unaware of Calth's fate but sensing the warp storm's menace, had begun mobilizing their defenses. Fleet elements from Makraj and Talassa had set course for Calth, their captains determined to aid their brothers. For the word-bearers, the Shadow Crusade had stalled at Calth. Lorgar's dream of drowning Ultramar in blood had collided with the Ultramarines' unyielding discipline. The traitors still held parts of the planet, but their momentum was gone. The battle for Calth was no longer a one-sided massacre. It had become a grinding war of attrition, and the Ultramarines were refusing to break. In the end, the betrayal at Calth would not destroy the 13 Legion. It would instead forge them into an even deadlier force, one that would go on to play a critical role in the Heresy's final stages. For the Ultramarines, Calth was a lesson. Loyalty alone was not enough. To survive in a galaxy torn by chaos, they would need unwavering discipline, adaptability, and the courage to fight even when all hope seemed lost. And somewhere in the void, adrift but alive, Robert Guilliman clung to life, his armor's life support failing, his body broken, but his will unbroken. He would return, and when he did, he would rally his legion, push back the Shadow Crusade, and stand against Horus's rebellion. The Great Heresy had only just begun, and the Ultramarines were far from finished.